What's up, guys? Just an update on my control modding. It's worked out pretty well. I have FPS Freaks on because I've been trying to test with the controller, doing some combat training on Black Ops. But yeah, definitely I would suggest removing the motors. The lightweight control is really nice. The only bad thing, I suppose, is because this is the wireless controller, the battery pack with the batteries are kind of heavy, so it's a little front heavy, but I don't really mind because when it sits in my hands like so, the way I grip it, I would rather not have too much weight in these handles anyway, just so it just bounces better. Like right now I just have it resting on my two middle fingers on the bottom, basically right there, and it sits perfectly fine. It's really comfortable to hold. You do get used to the forward weight a little, but it's not that heavy. I went ahead here, you can see 632 pan head screw. I went ahead and I drilled into the side of control. Right now I have one of the security Torx screws in there, just because what I found was when I do screw this all the way down, the pressure coming back from the trigger on the inside from the last video I showed you guys, it kind of splits the controller apart. I haven't put any of the other screws back in just because in case I want to do any more modification on the inside. It's a pain to have to take all those screws out, especially since I don't exactly have the right bit for it. I only have a regular Torx bit, not a security Torx bit. And I'm still in the process of tracing out the control, trying to figure out the best way of adding an additional B button, down here for quick melee attacks. But yeah, originally I actually had one of these smaller screws. I'm not really sure if you can see it like that. It sits a lot better in here, basically because it's the same diameter as the hole that I have in here. Let me try and take this out. But yeah, not sure if you can see. Probably won't be easy. I kind of went into an angle a little bit just because I kind of figured that the plastic was on the thin side, and especially if I screwed straight down, you can see here that's actually a scratch. At first I thought maybe I actually cracked the case over to where the trigger is. But yeah, that's why I went a little more to the side and into an angle towards that corner of the trigger, just so I would have some extra plastic here for rigidity. I wanted to use a 440 screw at first, but unfortunately I couldn't find the right bit size for it. So I went ahead with the 632. It works out well. The pan head kind of sticks out a little more, but because when I normally hold the controller, it's down here in this portion and not really up here, it's not that big of a deal for me. And to be honest, my fingers aren't the longest fingers in the world, so even when I am pressing here, it's only the tip of my finger that's hitting this top of the screw, and it doesn't really get in the way. I can just feel it's there. One thing about this mod is I didn't really like it all that much. I kind of felt like it made the trigger a little mushy, in that it worked out quite well. It was a hairpin trigger where basically just the lightest push in would fire off the gun, but the only issue I had with that is because usually when I fire I don't let go of the trigger completely. I always have my finger on the trigger, and what I found was happening was when I was trying to rapid fire a semi-automatic gun or like a handgun, it would freeze up on me. And just because the trigger has to come out a certain amount before you can fire again. Now it's not an issue if you're using a fully auto gun all the time, because you just press down. It's not it does affect your burst firing a little, but what I found with semi-autos like the FAL is that I would freeze up. Sometimes I would be pressing really fast and the gun wouldn't be firing, and it's just because the trigger, I don't give the trigger enough slack to come out and reset itself again. On the other hand, I don't like having to slap at the trigger. I find that it moves your controller, like your entire controller, if you slap it too hard, which because of that spring pressure you do have to slap it quite a bit to get it to fire. And you can see here, like every time I slap it, the controller moves, and if I'm trying to strafe and aim at the same time, it can mess up my aim for long shots, which is usually what I'll be burst firing with an automatic rifle with anyway, for those long range shots. So I'm not a huge fan, and I mean, I can back it out to the point where that doesn't happen and it doesn't freeze up, but it's basically back at where it originally started. So, you know, this mod, at first I thought it was a great idea, and I think it is for some situations, but it's not really for me, and I'll leave it there. You know, it's just a hole there. It's cosmetic. I'm not going to bother filling it in. And if I do want it for a particular gun or a particular game, then, you know, it's pretty good for sniping, like if you're going to quick scope or something, just because you usually, you know, if you miss your first shot, you're probably dead anyway. It doesn't really matter. What I did go ahead with was do a trigger stop right here. Basically, it's drilling another 632 hole in there, and then I use the aluminum spacer plus then a 632 flathead. I think it's 1/4 inch. And this I like a lot more, just because, you know, the trigger normally goes all the way down in, and what happens is usually when you fire the gun, well, when you press the trigger, the gun usually fires around here. So I do have a little space here, which I could always use a wider spacer to fill the gap in, but I don't think it's necessary, just because, you know, it's a little bit, you know, when I was drilling it, there is a post in there where the spring, the other side of the spring, kind of hooks onto, and I didn't want to drill too deep in, but I'll see if I can find a thicker spacer just to get it right at the sweet spot. But this is nice just because it does save time, because if I fire with a regular controller, I'll usually go all the way down. In this case, now I actually have a physical block. It took me a little while to get used to it, and I would also have it freeze up a little, but, or not really freeze up, but it would kind of mess up my aim. Like, it would mess up my timing, because I would expect to have more time in between shots to correct my aim, but I've gotten used to it and I really like it. I don't really think I'm going to do it on this left side trigger, just because it's not really necessary. You know, if you're aiming down sight, you press it once, and then if you're letting go, that means that you're done and you don't really have to press it again. And that's also the reason why I didn't really do the hairpin trigger modification on this side, just because I felt it really wasn't necessary. Most of the time when you're pressing on this trigger, at least for a first-person shooter, it's a momentary thing, or it's not something that you have to do very quickly. So this actually turned out quite well. Drilling into the controller, I was a little worried at first when I was drilling this hole, just because, you know, I've never really drilled into a controller before. I didn't know how soft or how hard or brittle the plastic was, but it was pretty easy. I used a relatively sharp bit and used slow speed and light pressure, and it actually went in pretty easily and went in pretty cleanly. I'm not sure how well these threads that I tapped in will hold. What I really wanted to do was use a threaded like metal insert into it, but I couldn't find any, at least at my work, for 440 size screws. And I know we have some 632 sized inserts somewhere, but I couldn't find them. So, you know, if I'm using an insert, the hole will be much larger anyway, and I can always cut out around where this hole is now and then epoxy an insert in. And those threads, since it's metal on metal, it'll be much more durable. And if I epoxy it onto the controller, it's not going to fall out. But for just this trigger here, like, no matter really how hard you press, the trigger portion of the plastic is actually pretty thick. And since I'm not putting any up and down tension or force, just side to side, I'm not worried about the threads getting stripped out like I would here, where there's constant pressure from the trigger pushing outwards. Anyway, so far, you know, it works out. I would definitely suggest this. It's a nice mod. It's pretty easy to do, so long as you kind of have the tools and the know-how, I suppose. But I mean, honestly, if someone's doing a service where they're modding controllers and they offer this, it's definitely something that I would pick up. Because at the website that I saw got this idea from, they offer it as an additional service to their modded controllers. And if I were ever to get one of their controllers or use their service to mod one of my existing controllers, I would definitely get this, just because it's so useful. And especially if it's removable, it's very functional in that, you know, if I'm playing a game that requires the full depression of the trigger, I can always remove it. So yeah, next video, I think it'll be when I actually get the button worked out. I'm not really sure where I'm gonna place it, and I still have to go to Radio Shack and pick up a button, but, you know, first I have to trace out the board first. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.